Welcome to today's session of our HR committee and the talent committee. This is our peer-to-peer subcommittee, and as many of you know, what we did is we developed two subcommittees within the greater committee. One focuses on peer-to-peer, so we can learn from each other and everybody's expertise, and we do this every month. So I want to welcome everybody. I am the co-chair, along with Christy Harper, who just joined us there, of this great committee, and I do thank you all for your time today. I want to introduce initially our speakers for today, Dora Medina, Director of HR from Emerson, as well as Lisa Freed-Groden, a partner with the law firm of Myers Freed-Groden. Also want to introduce, I don't know, Kaylee, is Megan with us today?
She's on.
Okay. Hey, Megan, would you like to say a few words on behalf of the chamber as the president?
Hi, good morning, everyone. Good morning. You'll appreciate I have three coworkers under 10, so I was muted getting them ready for homeschool today. So thank you all for joining us. I just wanted to mention that that Delta Dental is the official sponsor of the Human Resources Committee, so we're so grateful for their continued support as we function as a virtual chamber, and thank you all for your continued active participation. This committee has put on some tremendous programming, and also thank you to Kay for being our steadfast coordinator through all of this. So please reach out to her if you have any questions at all. She's a wonderful resource. And thank you to Michael, Christy, John, Jim, and Alan for all of your efforts on this committee as well. This is such important information for our members. So thank you very much. And if you want to learn more about Delta Dental's programs, please visit their website. I believe they have a free tool you can use, and they also have insurance for smaller companies under 50 and for those who are self-employed. So that's something that I know they want to get the word out about. So thank you all, and I'll turn it back over to Michael.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much. Christy, I see you are with us today. Would you like to welcome the group as well?
Yes, I was actually privileged to be part of the pre-planning for this session, and I'm really looking forward to seeing the final perspectives of both an HR practitioner and legal counsel on how to bring people back safely, get them engaged in the workplace again. And I think those two perspectives are going to add a lot of value to the members today. So thank you all for joining us. I'm really glad you were able to make it this morning.
Yeah, great. And Kay, how about any do's and don'ts for everybody on the webinar today from a technology standpoint?
So I think a lot of people have already been on a lot of these, so I'm sure they know the rundown, but just so everyone knows, I will be muting all. You will not be able to unmute yourselves except for us presenters and speakers. Please direct all questions and comments to chat. I also want to comment that after every committee meeting, we are having a leads and needs where you share who you are, what your business is, and what you need, and look for connections. So please stick around for that after the presentation and after the meeting. So I am going to mute all. Hold on one moment. And the presenters can unmute themselves, and I'll unmute you guys. And that's all. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you. So now I want to introduce Jim O'Hearn. Jim is the chair of our peer-to-peer subcommittee. He does a tremendous amount of work behind the scenes to make these programs possible. We're forever indebted to Jim for all that he does and the great wisdom and experience that he brings to each and every one of these programs. So Jim, let me turn the program over to you.
Thanks, Mike, and welcome everybody. We do have I think an excellent agenda for today and focus. Talk about relevant to our issues in HR. You might not be reopening as Christy is today, sitting as Director of Human Resources in her organization, reopening as we speak and dealing with all of these issues. I'm not planning on reopening anything. This is my office. but it's really, I'm very interested in learning about what our HR colleagues are going through in this process. And if you have that interest, I think we've got the right folks here to help answer the question. We'll cover this agenda today. We're going to look at return to work policies, some of the legal issues associated with that, how to go about inviting people back, some of the new legal issues that are emerging and how we avoid concerns and retaliation, and the need for policies and policy changes. And we're going to cover standards, policies, human resources, concerns, issues, how to protect the organization, the employees, and work methodically through the process. And I think we've got a perfect overview for where we are today with the struggles of organizing returning to work. And we've got wonderful leaders with us today. Dora Medina is the Director of Human Resources at Emerson. Dora at Ellicott. I'm sorry, Dora, can you tell us a little bit about your, what is your title, Dora? What is your role? And tell us a little bit about what Ellicott does.
Sure. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Jim. My name is Dora, and I am the Director of Human Resources for Ellicott Associates. Ellicott is a full-service environmental health and safety consulting firm. So what does that mean in times like this? We are the people that do industrial hygiene. We make sure that your environment is going to be safe for you, for your workers, for the environment, for the community. We also offer health and safety services. We are the folks that are going out there and making sure that your employees are following any kind of COVID regulations. Are they wearing the proper PPE? Are they socially distancing? So our staff is comprised of certified industrial hygienists, certified safety professionals, PhDs, you name it, we have it. Again, everything is centered around health and safety.
Wonderful. We're so glad you're here. It's talk about being up close and personal with the issues. You guys are seeing it all, and we really look forward to what we can learn from you today. Also with us today is Lisa Fried-Gooden. Lisa is the partner and founder of Fried-Gooden, a local attorney law firm that has specialized in helping us through this. Lisa, tell us a little bit about your role, the firm, and where you are with the return to work issues that we're facing today.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Lisa Fried-Gooden, and I'm an employment attorney. Our firm is normally in Parsippany in terms of our big physical location. We have been working at home since mid-March, and we'll see at what point we will be physically returning. Fortunately for attorneys, it's pretty easy to work from home, and it's not as difficult a transition as other businesses. I've spent a lot of time, I would say the majority of the time since mid-March, dealing with return to work issues or initially closing issues. So I'm pretty familiar with concerns on both the employer and employee side throughout this whole process. And it's challenging times for everybody. It really is. So we're hoping today to give some information that will make everything seem a lot less overwhelming and give some good tips on how to implement things and prevent concerns and questions. Happy to be here.
Wonderful, Lisa. Thank you so much. We're so appreciative of both of you guiding us through some of the issues and what we can do to prepare ourselves to address them accordingly as HR practitioners. In terms of our process, Dora and Lisa will each walk us through different aspects of the issues here for 20 minutes or so apiece. We'll run this for roughly 40 minutes or so, and we'll follow that with an open forum discussion around our view of how to address some of these concerns as we turn at 10:30 to our own practices. If the chat box is open, so feel free to, if you have a question, go ahead, jot it into chat. If we need to, we'll address those as we're going along. you should note that the presentation will be available for you after the session today. So all of this information will be available for you. The session's also being recorded. And with that, Dora, let me turn it to you. And again, we're so glad you're with us.
Thank you. Thanks again, Jim. So just one quick question. Jim, will I tell you when to go to the next slide?
Sure. Yep.
Okay, fantastic. All right, so thank you everyone for joining us today to discuss the road to returning to work and humanizing the workplace. As we look toward life after the worst of COVID-19 pandemic has passed, business recovery is going to be paramount. This includes assessing business operations, bringing employees back to work, ensuring a safe workplace. And even if these steps are further in the future for some employers than others, the time to start thinking about these issues begins now, because the next steps come with a whole new set of labor and employment challenges for all of us. So Jim, if we could please go to the next slide, we can discuss the agenda.
Can you see that, Dora?
Mine is still on the first slide.
Jim, you need to start the PowerPoint. Go to slideshow view show.
I'm sorry, Kaylee, is it not moving?
No, can you try turning off the screen share and then starting it over again, because nothing is changing. There we go.
Sorry about that, everybody. Let's try that again. How are we doing?
Can you hit enable editing on that bar on the top?
Sorry, Kaylee, I don't have an enable editing. I'm screen sharing. Slides are moving.
We're not seeing it.
Kaylee, do you want to run it?
Yeah, let me try.
Yeah, Jim, do you have more than one screen? Because it might be just showing the wrong screen.
Let me launch it since I have it as backup. Okay, so we want the agenda, right?
Look at
Yes,
Wonderful. All
Perfect.
right, we're in business.
that. Beautiful.
teamwork. Okay. So the agenda, thank you. So today we're going to discuss crafting a return to work plan, what should be included in the plan, and also what key legal issues to consider. We're also going to be discussing the recalling of employees, how to address employees who are reluctant to return to work, as well as EEOC and ADA accommodations, and finally some policy review tips. So the intention for today is to learn to craft a return to work strategy that's going to make your employees feel safe and comfortable while allowing the organization to run as successfully as you can. Okay, so let's dive right in, Kaylee. Can you go to the next slide? So once your organization has determined that they are able to reopen after following all of the government guidelines, you should start crafting a return to work plan. As human resources professionals, the best thing that we could do right now is provide information, protection, and engagement to our employees. We can do that by crafting a return to work plan that is transparent and inclusive. So when crafting a return to work plan, you should be thinking of a few things. Who will be involved in making the decisions for the organization? What changes the organization has made from a health and safety standpoint? Which employees do you invite back? When and how? How to address employees who are concerned about returning to work? How to address training? And then finally, documenting, and updating all of your policies and your procedures. Employees are going to be fearful They're going to be reticent and they're going to be reluctant to come to work in some cases. And having a clear plan detailing all of the steps that you're taking to keep everyone safe will really help alleviate any anxiety that your employees or their families may feel. And it's also beneficial for you as the employer because it builds trust. And the best strategy right now is for you to appear as organized and as prepared as possible. Kaylee, could you please go to the next slide? So the return to work plan. So let's discuss a little bit of the framework as you craft the plan. So you're going to need to implement a framework to ensure that you and your team are prepared for every possible scenario, to ensure a safe workplace and the ability to continue to service your clients. This is super important to ensure consistency within each work site and across multiple work sites, depending on your organization. So what does your framework look like? First, you need to identify and create a strategic committee within your organization. This team is going to have clear roles and responsibilities and should be representative of key functions in the organization. For example, human resources, finance, operations, management, and non-management roles. This strategic committee will lead the rest of the organization in addressing key decisions such as closures, travel, recalling employees, etc. Second, your return to work plan should have clear protocols and procedures for returning to work. And if your organization needs it, you might want to have a return to work plan in different languages. These protocols will address all of the safety or preventative measures that the company is taking to ensure that the employees are safe and all of the guidelines that the employees are expected to follow. For instance, some employers will have to comply with, or employees are going to have to comply with federal, state, and local directives on social distancing in the workplace. So some of the considerations that you might think as you craft your plan would be evaluating your workplace layouts and consider making certain one way if social distancing guidelines cannot otherwise be met. Using plexiglass shields or tables or other barriers to block airborne particles. You can develop protocols to avoid crowding in elevators. Any kind of closing or modifying of certain common areas like lunchrooms, for example, or time clock stations or workplace fitnesses. Those can all also be modified. Or actually erecting physical barriers or implementing rules to limit the sharing of equipment and supplies. Some additional considerations besides social distancing that you could implement could be screening measures, right? These are the guidelines around employees and visitors when they enter your space. So for example, temperature screenings, questions about their potential exposure to COVID-19. What cleaning and disinfecting measures the organization is taking is also important. For example, addressing frequently touched surfaces. How often are they being cleaned? It could also include what cleaning supplies would be available and how employees should use them. You will also want to communicate to your team what steps that they can take as individuals to keep themselves and the rest of the team safe. For example, if they're not feeling well, stay home or go home if they're feeling ill. Maintaining social distancing, washing hands frequently or using hand sanitizer, covering nose and mouth when sneezing or coughing, wearing a face covering if they choose, and following all other policies and guidelines. And you'll also want to discuss new processes as it involves meetings, right? I mean, it's great. We've all been accustomed to Zoom meetings, and I think that we have become all experts in it. But if in-person meetings are necessary, they should be conducted in a manner that's consistent with the social distancing requirements, as well as federal, state, and local regarding group gatherings, right? So some examples on new processes around meetings, you can start posting updated maximum occupancy signage on meeting rooms to limit attendance. You might want to remove extra chairs to avoid the use of the room by more people at one time as recommended. Your plan should also have detailed sick leave considerations, including what to do when an employee tests positive for COVID-19 And Lisa is going to comment more in detail during her topic of the discussion. And then finally, training. Training, it's extremely important to establish those clear communications with your employees and the management team about the new processes and expectations for when they return to work. Be very specific about when training is going to occur. Will it be before they return to work? Will it be the day of that they come back to work? Will it be during that shift, or all of the above? It's very important to train all of your management team on how to also respond to potential scenarios. That way you and your management team are all on the same page. And finally, I would also suggest communicating all of the training plans and new processes to your management team prior to the employees returning to work. Haley, can we switch? Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about communication. Communication in times like this, folks, is crucial. Your employees are going to have to really be very communicative, not just with signage, but also just constant reminders through emails. Any communication platforms that you use, like Teams or Slacks, that you have, it's super important to continue to communicate to your employees that you are doing everything possible in order to keep them safe. So a little bit about communication and your return to work plan. So who do you need to communicate to and why? Your employees. You know, you need to speak to your employees. And very important as you craft this part of your plan, really craft the messages through the eyes of your team first, and then your organization. Because when we set expectations that there's going to be a challenge, that challenge then becomes less frustrating for the team. So please over communicate. Setting expectations early is going to go a really long way. I would also recommend that you send the plan to employees prior to their first day. It should include pictures or videos of your site. It should be reviewed also with the employee on their first day. I would also include an acknowledgement for them to sign and for them to return it to you on that first day. Again, managers, pay special attention to this group. It's very important to prepare this team as they're going to be on the front lines when responding to any employees during the pandemic. I touched on it briefly, but it's very important to conduct advanced training sessions for managements or supervisors and prepare them on all of your new policies and your protocols. I would really like to emphasize to the management team as you're training them on all of the technical aspects to also remember the human side, right? Communication includes active listening. Have a conversation. It's a two-way communication. And also train your team to be able to quickly identify and resolve the employee's issues so they don't escalate. And finally, train them on being proactive, checking in with their direct reports frequently. I would also recommend speaking with your landlord. Find out what safeguards they're putting in place, especially if you're in a building with multiple tenants and there's communal areas. And definitely reach out to legal counsel, and Lisa's going to explain all of the reasons why, to make sure that you're in compliance, and they're going to be excellent to really guide you through all of that minutia. You're also going to want to speak with your insurance carriers. You know, that's workers' comp, general liability. They might have new COVID-19 procedures, so you need to find out what those are. Suppliers, you'll need to identify what suppliers you're going to need and purchase items for the employees prior to their first day. And these could be suppliers of PPE, personal protective equipment, plexiglass, any kind of cleaning or disinfecting materials. You are going to also want to communicate with your customers. You need to let your customers know about your plan, what safety measures they're going to experience if they go to your site, and also what they can expect from your employees when your team goes to their site. For example, if you're going to require temperature checks when they come in to your site, if you're going to require them wearing gloves, etc., getting their temperatures taken. And also interviewing and onboarding. I wanted to highlight interviewing and onboarding because every time I speak to my HR colleagues, a lot of them are shocked that we have been hiring and we have been interviewing during this time. So I think a lot of you might be in the same boat. So it's a good plan to have a, it's a good idea, excuse me, to have a plan around how you would handle that. So you could.
Dora, I'm sorry, as you transition into interviewing, can we ask a quick question on communications?
Absolutely.
You raise an interesting point that we should frame the communications from the standpoint of the employee, our team members, keeping them in mind. And don't forget the human side of all of your communications. Can you say a word or two about any key learnings you've had? What has struck you as you've tried to shape things from the employee's perspective?
That you have to be able to have an open mind. You have to be able to look at all the different perspectives. Everybody has their own concerns, their own fears. And I think that if you craft your plan or, thinking about the employees and being empathetic to those scenarios, it's going to go a long way. Your employees are really going to feel valued. You're going to build that sense of community that maybe you've been lacking because employees have been laid off or because all you have done is Zoom meetings. So I think it's very important to always, human resources, right? To always keep that human piece there. It's so important.
That seems like really good advice. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. So where were we? We were discussing interviewing. Okay, so again, if you choose to bring people into your space for interviews, also communicate with them. Let them know what they should expect, what safeguards the organization has taken, and what rules they need to abide by. Okay. And right now, you might have questions around all of those legalities when it comes to hiring during these times. So here are some common questions and hopefully some helpful answers. So you may wonder if you may screen applicants for COVID-19. And according to the EEOC, yes, you can actually screen job applicants for symptoms of COVID after making a conditional job offer, as long as it does so for all entering employees in the same job type. Another question may be if you are allowed to take applicants' temperature as part of the post-offer pre-employment medical exam. And according to the EEOC, yes, post-offer pre-employment medical exams, which would include temperature taking, are permitted after an employer has made a conditional offer of employment. Maybe you need to delay the start date of an applicant who has COVID-19 symptoms or any symptoms associated with it. Can you do that? According to the EEOC, yes. In addition, the CDC guidance also provides that an individual who has COVID-19 or symptoms associated with it should not be in the workplace. What if you extend an offer? Can you withdraw a job offer when it needs the applicant to start immediately, but the individual has COVID or symptoms associated with it? Yes. According to the EEOC, with reliance on current CDC guidance, an employee cannot safely enter the workplace and therefore the employee may withdraw the job offer. And finally, can you postpone a new hire start date or withdraw a job offer because the individual is at a higher risk for COVID? For example, if the individual is over 65 or pregnant? No. According to the EEOC, the fact that the CDC has identified those who are 65 or older or pregnant women as being of greater risk, it does not justify unilaterally postponing the start date or withdrawing the job offer. However, an employer may choose to allow telework or discuss with the individuals if they would like to postpone the start dates. Again, it's that human touch. It's just being able to communicate and understand different circumstances. And again, that's going to go a long way, especially with a new hire. You're already investing in them. And finally, documentation. It's very important to document all of the changes, policies, and procedures. Communicate them in writing through all the different channels that you use, and document all of the training of your employees. And the last thing I would like to say about crafting the return to work plan is to resist the temptation to make exceptions for certain employees or executives when it comes to guidelines that you're putting forward for all of the employees' safety. Continue to be very purposeful and calculated when it comes to your return to work plan.
Dora, a question around communications from Taryn. Taryn is saying, what does taking temperature have to do with asymptomatic folks? Can you request an antibody test for potential new hires?
Lisa, I might ask you that question because I am unaware if you are able to antibodies. I don't even know if everybody has the ability to get an antibody test.
We're going to address that once we switch to my presentation. So if we could just hold off for a few minutes.
Great, great. Thanks, Lisa.
Alan, did you have a question? No? Okay. All right, Kaylee, can we go to the next slide, please?
All right, so thank you, Dora. That was terrific and really practical, excellent advice. And I agree with all of her tips. So I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about things through an employment law perspective. There's a lot of employment law issues that are coming to the forefront now as you put in place a plan to bring people back. And so I wanted to focus on those issues. I just want to say up front, I am an employment lawyer. Nothing we're going to talk about today is legal advice from me. It's for information only. You can go to the next slide, please. Yes, you can skip one more actually. Okay, so I want to talk about some of the legal issues that are going to be coming about. So one is regulations regarding preventing and reducing the spread of COVID-19, capacity limits, positive cases, reporting them, accommodations you have to make, what you're allowed to do as far as screening, leave rights, and if you are changing people's roles from what you had before, you may need to reassess people's exempt status. Different discrimination issues are coming to light, different employee benefits and rights when they can and can't return. If a business has taken out a PPP, Paycheck Protection Program loan, there may be issues that are involved and impacted by your return to work plan, and just retaliation issues that can come up once people come back. Next slide, please. So one of the things that's been kind of difficult for people to think about is, what rules do I follow? It seems that there's just a whole bunch of information out there coming from the state, coming from the CDC, coming from OSHA. What do I listen to? Unfortunately, one of the challenges right now is that there are multiple laws that are going to govern everyone's business. And so it's really important for you to know which ones apply to your business. In some cases, there's going to be rules from the municipality, state general guidance, state specific guidance for types of businesses, industry regulators are issuing guidance, and then there's also CDC and OSHA guidance, both generally for employers and also for certain types of businesses. And the EEOC has also issued guidance on various COVID-19 related issues. So there's a lot of different laws, and it's really important to not fly by the seat of your pants right now and to make sure that you get advice from counsel on exactly which set of regulations apply to your business as you put an opening plan together. So even though there are going to be distinctions in terms of everyone's specific business and industry and where you're located, what seems to be commonly coming out of all these regulations is some key issues. One is that the employers need to be assessing employees' potential exposure to the virus and putting in place procedures to address the risk of exposure. I just want to say also that generally under OSHA, there is this obligation to keep people safe, that employers have to provide employees with a place of employment that is free from recognized hazards that are causing or likely to cause death or serious physical harm. Because COVID-19 causes both, that means that all businesses have to take affirmative steps to ensure that workers are not exposed to the virus and to effectively respond if it happens. Next slide, please. So when I'm talking about potential exposure for workers, these are the kinds of things that OSHA indicates businesses should be thinking about. So first, in terms of outside of your office, let's talk about some of the things. Are people commuting by public transportation or by their own car? Do they have another job that puts them in contact with a different group of people than maybe your job does? Do they live with someone who has such a job? And with regard to the transportation issue, I have been hearing that there are some businesses that are actually providing compensation to employees because they are taking public transportation to encourage them to not do that, to drive themselves. In terms of internal issues, so think about all the job functions that everyone in the workplace has and assess how those duties themselves, what they're actually doing day to day, and the people both inside your organization and outside the organization impact their level of exposure to potentially sick people. And depending on the business you're in and the types of jobs people do, there's various risks of exposure. People obviously who work in healthcare or who work in very public-facing jobs are going to have different risks than people who are only working in an office. And finally, your work site itself, and Dora talked a lot about this in terms of just thinking about the flow of your space, what you're doing to separate people, and how easy it is to keep distant, what that will do to impact the potential exposure. So once you have kind of a picture of all these things, then the regulations are going to require you to put in place specific procedures to address the potential risk. And they break down in many cases to the following things. So identifying and isolating potentially sick people, encouraging people to stay home when they're sick, modifying your work site for social distancing, a lot about preventing infection. There's going to be a lot of detailed requirements on what you need to do to prevent the infection in the workplace. Contact tracing requirements. The states have different requirements on this, so you should know what they are for all the states in which you operate, and I'm going to go a little bit more into that in a moment. And finally, just reinforcing what Dora said, really encourage people to talk about these things, to ask questions. This is not, putting in place a hammer and this is what you have to follow and we don't want to hear about it. The exact opposite, just as Dora said, you want there to be open communication, you want there to be trust, and you want to know any questions or concerns about everything that you're doing. Next slide, please. So Dora talked a little bit about this. I'm gonna go over, kind of the EEOC's thinking on what are you allowed to do right now and why. So normally, as HR professionals, you can't just ask a million questions about people's health issues, in a vacuum, and that's the norm. Because we are in a pandemic that causes death or serious illness, the EEOC says that's a direct threat to businesses. And as a result of that, they've laid out things that employers can do to minimize the chance of that threat occurring. So they have identified that you can take temperature, you can test to see if they have the virus, and you can ask employees if they're experiencing the symptoms. And I would encourage you to check the CDC website for the current list of symptoms because it has been changing over time. The last time I looked at this guidance, it did not address antibody tests. And just in terms of what I've been reading about it, that is not as definitive an answer as these other things in terms of making kind of initial determinations that people should not be at work or at work. So that's what I can just say about antibody tests right now. It was not listed as one of the specific things that they said you are allowed to do right now. I don't know if anything's changed, in the last week or so. And it's important, as you always do with any medical information, to keep everything confidential in a separate file, limit access to those in your organization who have a need to know this information. And the only exception to that is if there is a positive test, you're going to have to report it to local and state health departments. Next slide, please. So what happens if somebody actually gets COVID-19 at work? What do you do? Don't panic. There's actually going to be a set of procedures to follow. So the first thing is to call your local and state health department, and they're going to lay out for you exactly what you need to do. I recommend finding out what the state that you're in is doing in terms of contact tracing. What are they actually asking the people who test positive to do in terms of the group of people? For example, in New Jersey, the contact tracers are asking those who test positive to tell them all people that were within 6 feet of them for at least 10 minutes in 2 days before they got symptoms. I know New York's is a little different. So if you're in multiple states, you really need to know what the contact tracing requirements are. And the reason for that is you should be asking any infected employee to identify those people at work, both employees and anyone outside your organization that they're interacting with, who fits in that group of people. Because you should be notifying them that they have been exposed to a person with COVID-19, should not be telling them who it is, just that they've been exposed, that they should be quarantined, isolating, getting tested, and talking to their healthcare provider. If there is a positive case, the CDC has requirements for cleaning and disinfecting, and in some cases, shutting down part or all of your facility when an employee tests positive. So, review the CDC guidance on that. At the end of the presentation, I have a bunch of slides with specific parts of the CDC, OSHA, and other websites that give all, the requirements on doing a lot of these things. So that's a helpful tool.
Excellent, Lisa. Thank you for that.
And, once you have someone who's come back, you're going to need a procedure for, once you have an employee who's tested positive, you're going to need a procedure for when they come back to work. So put that in place beforehand. Next slide, please. So in some businesses, it's easier to figure out whether someone's gotten the virus at work. And in some businesses, it's not easy at all. And OSHA realizes this, but they have put in place a new requirement at the end of May regarding when you have to report a COVID-19 case at work to OSHA. So I want to talk about this new requirement that just was put in place. So if you have an employee who has COVID-19 and the case is work-related, which I'm going to talk about in a minute, and one of the following things has happened, you have to report it to OSHA. They've died, days away from work, restricted in their work or transferred to another job, medical treatment beyond first aid, lost consciousness, or a licensed health professional has diagnosed them with a serious illness or injury. So if those three factors have happened, you have to report it. So let's talk about what's work-related. Next slide, please. So OSHA basically says, if you do a reasonable investigation to find out whether or not it's happened at work, then they will deem you to have sufficiently addressed the issue with regard to your decision to report it or not report it on an OSHA log. So they give guidance on what does that look like. So businesses should be asking the employee how he or she got the virus, talk to them about what happened outside of the workplace that might have led to the illness, and then think about their environment at work of whether it could have led to exposure. Are other people sick? What is your physical space like? Who are they interacting with? And that these are the things that you should be doing, and you should be documenting your investigation so that if OSHA does an audit of your business, you have the records to show what you did to look into it and why you decided to report or not report. Next slide, please. So they're helping us out a little bit here with this thought process by giving some examples of what would make you think it's work-related or not work-related. So in terms of likely work-related, they're saying if there's no other alternative explanation and any of these things have happened, it's likely to have been caused at work. Several people in the workplace are working closely together who have it. A worker got COVID-19 shortly after being exposed for a long time to a customer or another coworker. Or their duties include frequent close exposure to the general public. in, you know, a region and where there's a lot of community spread. So they're saying that if those type of scenarios happen, you should be presuming it's work related and report it. On the other hand, if this is one person in the facility and their job duties do not involve frequent contact with the public, or if there's someone who is spending time at home with someone who has COVID-19 or has been exposed otherwise to someone on the outside with symptoms, OSHA says that's not likely to be work related and you wouldn't have to report it. This is not necessarily such obvious decision making, so it's a good idea to get counsel involved in this decision. Next slide. Okay, Dora.
Thank you, Lisa. That was extremely informative, so thank you. So folks, we have discussed the return to work plan, the framework around it. Lisa has made sure to teach you how to be in compliance, right? And if you're uncertain, call Lisa. Now it's time to invite your team back. So as it is unlikely for most employers that all employees will be able to return to work at the workplace at the same time, you should consider what employee departments, groups, or units you should return first based on your business needs and in compliance with health precautions, right? So social distancing, maximum occupancy requirements. A very important sidebar here is make sure that the decision on who you bring back isn't based or perceived to be based on a protective class, such as sex, age, national origin, pregnancy, etc. You'll want to look for objective criteria and bring back people that are going to get your business to work. You can develop objective criteria by focusing on your team's skill sets. Revisit old job descriptions. Talk with managers or project managers to get feedback on work performance. Some of you might be thinking, I have multiple great employees and limited work. What do I do? I would definitely recommend going with seniority. This is always a safe go-to. And next, you'll want to document your decision-making process. So the objective criteria that you used, how you determined who to recall, and whose input played part in the decision process. All of those things should be put into some kind of matrix. And once you've made the list of your employees, you'll want to review all of your demographics just to make sure that you're in compliance. Definitely give the recalled employees as much notice as possible. People have a lot going on right now, and giving them the time to plan is going to go a long way. It is also a good idea to have them provide you with an acknowledgement, and I touched on it earlier, on their intent to return to work. And then that way you are more organized for planning purposes. And again, communications should detail all of the safeguards and the changes that you've made or that you will be implementing so they can already start getting ready. Next slide, please, Kylie. So when you start the process of inviting employees back, you must also anticipate your employees' responses. So despite your best efforts to create a safe work environment, some employees may refuse to come to work based on nothing more than just general fear of rejoining public life while the coronavirus pandemic is still going on. And as human resource professionals, we must prepare for this heightened level of anxiety. So if a worker is scared to come in, the first thing that you need to do is understand the reason for the fear. If he or she has made statements that there could be potentially a good cause reasons, then I would begin the ADA interactive process. So what is for good cause reasons? I recommend speaking with legal counsel and assessing what you can do to address the employee's requests and accommodations. Because the people in this group are all in special circumstances and they have rights that affect them when returning back to work. For example, employees that have no childcare, pregnant employees, people who have a medical condition or a certain age that makes them more susceptible to getting sick, people who have COVID or are taking care of someone who currently has COVID or COVID-related issues. If people legitimately cannot come to work because of these reasons, encourage them to apply for the resources that are out there available either by the government or if your organization has them. What if your employee just simply refuses to come back and they don't have one of those good cause reasons? Just don't shut down their concerns. In some cases, it might just be, you going over the new procedures and the policies that you've put in place to keep everyone safe. Explain how these measures meet all of the government guidelines. And in some cases, it might be having someone continue to work from home and join the team in the office at a later date, or giving folks additional PPE, or moving them to a different part of the building where there's less contact with people. Just try to work with your team and be as flexible as you can. And then in the event that you have exhausted all of your means, you must advise your employee that in the event that the employee does not find the efforts that you have made on their behalf acceptable and still refuses to return to work, they will effectively have abandoned their position. And I'm assuming you all have some kind of policy around what abandonment means. Is it not coming to work after 3 days, 2 days, a week? It all depends on, again, your organization's policy. And if employees have already been on leave, definitely reach out to legal counsel to extensions. Next slide, Kylie. Thank you.
Right, so picking up from there, this is really a dicey conversation right now. I'm getting a lot of calls from business owners with different scenarios of people stressing out about coming back to work and worried about getting sick, wanting to stay on unemployment. So there's a lot of focus on this right now and a lot of concern. So it is really important when you're thinking about this plan to anticipate this coming back. And Dora talked a lot about the importance of training your managers. The HR people know the laws and know what they're supposed to do. But unfortunately, there's not always the communication and understanding on the part of the managers on the front lines, the ones who are calling the people back to work on their team. So it's really important that they understand that there are some people who legitimately cannot come back and should not be coming back right now. So be sure in the training piece to really address that with the people that are offering the jobs back. I wanted to just flag some discrimination issues that can be coming up right now. And again, people are very sensitive and a little on edge as a result of everything that's going on. So if somebody coughs at work, people may have an immediate reaction. Oh my God, this person's got COVID. So, obviously, a manager can talk to that person and assess, whether this is or isn't something that requires someone to be isolated, tested, and so on. But there is the potential for a perceived disability discrimination claim if an adverse action is taken simply as a result of a perception that someone has an illness. So make sure, everyone's being careful about that. If people are taking time off, there are protections under the regular disability laws, as well as a new right under this New Jersey wage and hour law that protects people against adverse action for that, and that guarantees their reinstatement when they've taken time off due to having COVID or a doctor thinking they had it. And Dora mentioned, not unilaterally making decisions not to bring back people who are at higher risk, but that could lead to a potential discrimination claim. And she also mentioned just the need for the interactive process on accommodation. I do want to talk a little bit about that because I've gotten a lot of calls about that as well. There are some organizations that are doing a great job with this right now, and there are others that are shutting people down and merely telling people, absolutely not work from home, you have to be here, you're essential, even when they really aren't, and not doing what they need to do to really assess undue burden. And the EEOC had guidance on telework before this. They've reiterated the fact that during COVID-19, it's even more important than ever to really make an assessment if people can work from home. And I think that there are likely going to be cases of failure to accommodate based on employers not considering telework in situations where it really was possible to do it, or the person even has been doing it for a while, you know, with regard to people who have medical issues and are concerned that their issue makes them more vulnerable to getting COVID-19. So be really careful with that scenario. Next slide, please. So I've gone through, you know, different benefits on the next couple of slides that are available to people who are in the special cases that Dora talked about that give them a right to be, you know, out of work due to COVID. You know, Dora identified the different types of scenarios, people who have the virus or symptoms, or taking care of someone, who don't have childcare, or taking care of their kids. And I outlined on the next couple of slides just the fact that there are a number of different federal and state, and in many cases your own organization's benefits that apply to people. So it's just important to think about all of those benefits as people are in the scenarios, and it's confusing right now. And, you know, to its credit, the New Jersey Department of Labor put out this great chart that I reference here, which walks you through the flow of when you should put people on the different benefits. I highly recommend checking that out. I have looked at it several times already. So I'm just going to, you know, go through the next slides and just say, you know, this is what these slides are designed to be, to just kind of help you walk through the benefits. So we can flip to the next slide, and probably the one after.
With a quick question.
Sure.
Terry asked the question around people refusing to return to work due to, you know, a fear of getting sick, even though that they may know that the workplace is safe. Are there more options available for us in HR, and how we manage that?
When you say options, what specifically are you asking?
If the employee refuses to return to work due to fear of getting sick, even though they know the workplace is safe.
And the person does not fit into any of these other criteria. They don't have a medical condition that makes them more vulnerable. It's just someone who's afraid.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, look, the options are, I mean, Dora touched on it. Can the person telework? Can you provide them with more PPE? Can you put them in a different part of the building where they're not in such close contact? I mean, there's certainly things you can try to do to work it out with them. I do want to talk about Paycheck Protection Program loans for a minute, because this issue is colliding with this right now. So, and there can be a whole seminar on PPP loans, and I'm not going to go into a great detail about it, but I just want to say that if your organization has received such a loan and there is a requirement for you to staff up to a certain level by a certain date, it's really important that you talk to your accountant and your legal counsel so that you are clear on what you are allowed to do as far as how long you can go in trying to rehire. And for example, on June 1st, the SBA issued guidance that said, if a business who has such a loan offers their job back to the employee who has been off at the same rate of pay, and the person refuses to come back, and you document that and you report it to the State Department of Labor that they've rejected, this will not impact your loan forgiveness. So there's no guidance right now on how to report that to the state DOL. And I've had questions myself from clients who have gotten remarks from employees that are in these protected special cases, people who actually have a medical condition that makes them more vulnerable to COVID-19, and they're on unemployment. And there's no guidance right now from the SBA on whether any of these COVID-specific scenarios entitling people to state benefits impacts this obligation to report to the state DOL, and New Jersey DOL has not given guidance yet. So one thing to think about doing in the interim is, and it says within 30 days of the person rejecting the offer. So one person to do, so you're not, you know, intentionally trying to disqualify someone from unemployment that may have a legitimate right to it. is to actually communicate the reason to the DOL that the person told you they're not coming back to work. My child's school and camp is closed and I have no childcare, I can't come back to work. Writing that when you report it to the DOL so that you're, fitting within the forgiveness requirements of the SBA, but the person is still on a COVID-related reason to getting unemployment. So until we get further guidance from the SBA on this reporting or, New Jersey Department of Labor, that's a good way to handle it. I also wanted to just talk about earned sick leave. If you rehire people within 6 months, they're entitled to any accrued New Jersey earned sick leave that they had before they left. And we can move to the next slide.
And Lisa, just one other question. Do the regulatory agencies, do they offer a clear list of underlying medical conditions that put people at greater risk for COVID?
CDC, yes, CDC has done that and it has expanded over time. So I would check that list. I mean, just off the top of my head, what some of them have been so far, and this is not all of them, asthma, diabetes, respiratory issues, and it also indicates people who are older. So I would, check the current CDC guidance on that.
Great, thanks.
So I wanted to switch gears and talk about potential retaliation claims. Next slide, please. So, we're dealing in unprecedented times right now, and nobody's had to be at work and worry so much about workplace safety. I mean, look, there's certain organizations where they're dealing with chemicals, they're dealing with certain types of machinery where workplace safety issues are on employees' minds a lot of the time before this, but then there's other just office type environments where people don't generally think about safety and worrying, are they going to get sick at work? And unfortunately now, there is going to be fear and anxiety even once people have agreed to come back. So it's really important to just acknowledge that once people have come back and to encourage people to talk about this. And so I want to emphasize what Dora said, that the training on the part of managers and also just this whole transparent time is more important than ever. And not only to make people feel good and feel safe, but also to avoid potential retaliation claims. So if somebody feels that they are in an unsafe place and that you have not followed the guidance on what you're supposed to do to prevent infection, and they get fired or disciplined in some way, that person would have a legal claim under SEPA or could have a course of action, under OSHA for retaliation. If 2 or more people are making such complaints, they could have avenues to pursue with the National Labor Relations Board in terms of an NLRA retaliation claim. And in terms of an employee just simply refusing to do their job once they're at work because they think it's unsafe, I just wanted to emphasize the actual standard under OSHA that allows someone to legally refuse to work in that situation. They have to have a good faith belief that a hazardous working condition is presenting an imminent risk of death or serious physical harm. They don't have enough time to contact OSHA for OSHA to come in and do an inspection, and they have already spoken to the employer. So, in light of all those requirements, this is why it's more important than ever for you to encourage people to come forward and ask the questions and raise the issues so that, you can address it and it doesn't get to the point of you being on the other end of a retaliation claim. Next slide, please. So we've talked in the whole presentation about all the new procedures you're putting in place and a lot of the new legal issues that are arising. And so it's important to make sure that all your policies are updated. And I've just given a list here of some of the ones that quickly come to mind that are impacted by all these things. So just make sure that you're doing that as part of your return to work plan. And because people are going to be doing new things, possibly wearing a face mask to work, some other things that is not the normal behavior, people are going to forget or not do it. There may be people who are uncomfortable doing it. So it's important to think in advance of what you're going to do if that happens. Obviously, at the beginning, when you're in a learning curve stage, you know, it's important to give people a chance to learn while also doing what you can to make sure people are safe. So for example, if you're requiring people to walk in the door with a face mask and someone's showing up without one, make sure that there's someone there to give them one. But, you know, maybe talk to that person and say, you know, you need to do this. And if someone's taking a face mask off during the day, think about what you're going to do in terms of discipline in advance and be consistent. Thanks. Next slide.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. All right, folks, so what's next? This is where the fun begins. Now your people are back, you're in compliance. So what should your mind frame be? It should be about describing a vision of happier times. There's gonna be a time when everybody's gonna be working safely, happily, and your organization is gonna be thriving. There's been a resounding message that has been playing for me is about never letting a good crisis go to waste. So make the best of it. And finally, I have a leadership game changer for you. Make personal phone calls to your team. Find out how they're doing. These calls can come from yourself, someone on your HR team, line managers, whoever, however it makes sense for your organization. Just letting your team know that you care is going to go such a long way after COVID-19 is gone. So I wish you guys all good luck. These are challenging times, but this is also great times for inspirational leaders to thrive. So good luck to you all. Thank you.
Dora and Lisa, this is fabulous information. Thank you so much. Dora, where you're leaving us here is particularly interesting. Can you say a little bit more about what you know, some examples of what you're hearing organizations portraying in terms of, you know, a vision of happier times, and anything else you're seeing in this new approach to leadership, this empathic leadership, and can you just say a word or two more about what you're seeing as some best practices in these areas?
Sure. I think leadership has become cognizant of the fact that we need to be in community. We need to understand all of our employees at all different levels. So I think that by leadership standing up, being transparent, sharing ideas, sharing, you know, we're at the end of Q2. This is a great time if you folks are having town halls, you know, getting out there, getting your people out there, your CEOs, your leadership team out there, giving these visions of these happier times, whatever that looks like for your organization. But you have to be transparent. And I think that that's what's going to go a long way for people to know that you have cared for them, you know, pre-COVID, during COVID, and post-COVID is going to be amazing for the morale, right? And it's going to give your company that momentum that we all desperately need in order to make 2021 a lot more successful than 2020.
Great example. Wonderful. Yeah. Lisa, any other best practices, exemplary leadership, organizational performance that you're seeing?
I would really just echo what Dora said is, you know, what kind of culture do you want your business to be known for? I mean, it's always an important issue, but I think these times are really emphasizing it more than ever. And, you know, are you a business that employees feel really has their interests at stake, or are you in business solely to make money? And I think so many of these issues we've talked about today are really about people's emotions and feelings and levels of risk. And so, you know, just paying attention to your culture, and actually in many cases, realizing that your culture has changed as we've shifted to either being closed or working from home, and trying to be the best that you can be for your employees as well as for your business.